The entire hotel went silent as a furious biker slammed his fist on the table, his voice booming with rage. The 15-year-old waitress, Sarah, stood frozen, her hands trembling as she clutched the tray. Guests watched in shock, but one man in tall bay, the room wasn't just watching. Keanu Reeves, seated quietly in the corner, slowly put down his coffee, his sharp eyes locking onto the scene. He didn't say a word, but the look on his face said everything. The biker had no idea he was seconds away from the biggest mistake of his life. The Grand Imperial Hotel buzzed with the usual evening crowd. Businessmen discussing deals over expensive whiskey, couples enjoying candlelit dinners, and waiters gliding between tables with trained precision. Among them was Sarah, a 15-year-old waitress, her uniform crisp but slightly wrinkled from a long shift. She had just placed a steaming plate of steak on a table when it happened. "Are you deaf or just plain stupid?" A deep, angry voice roared through the dining hall. Every head turned. A burly biker with a leather jacket, tattoos snaking down his arms, and a beer in hand glared at Sarah. His thick fingers clenched into fists as he towered over her, his face red with rage. Sarah's hands trembled as she tried to process what she had done wrong. Had she spilled something, forgotten an order? Her heart pounded against her ribs as the man pushed his chair back, standing to his full, intimidating height. "I said no onions. Are you trying to piss me off?" he snarled, shoving the plate toward her. The silverware clattered against the table, making her flinch. A tense silence settled over the restaurant. The other waiters hesitated, unsure whether to intervene. The manager peeked from behind the counter but didn't dare step in. But in the far corner of the restaurant, one man did not look away. Keanu Reeves sat still, watching. His expression was unreadable, but his sharp gaze was locked onto the scene like a predator observing its prey. He slowly placed his coffee cup down, his fingers resting lightly on the table as if anticipating the moment he would need to act. The biker had no idea whose attention he had just drawn. Sarah swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay professional. I'm sorry, sir, I can get you a new plate." "I don't want a new plate. I want you to do your damn job right the first time," the biker barked, slamming his fist on the table. A few guests gasped. Sarah flinched, her fingers tightening around the tray she held. Her eyes darted to her manager, but he turned away, pretending not to see. No one was going to help her, except one man. Keanu Reeves slowly stood up. His movements were calm, deliberate, like a wolf rising from its slumber. He adjusted the cuffs of his dark jacket, his eyes never leaving the scene. The biker, still fuming, finally noticed the shift in energy. He felt the weight of a steady, unshaken gaze pressing against him. Keanu was watching, not blinking, not speaking, just watching. The biker turned fully, locking eyes with Keanu. "You got a problem, buddy?" he sneered. Keanu didn't answer. He took a slow step forward, his presence alone sending a ripple of tension through the room. Sarah dared to glance at him, hope flickering in her eyes. The biker chuckled, shaking his head. "What, you think you can just stare me down? I don't give a damn who you are." Keanu's lips barely parted as he spoke, his voice dangerously low. "Then that's your first mistake." The biker stiffened. He wasn't used to hesitation, creeping into his chest, but something about the way Keanu stood, completely composed, completely unafraid, made his pulse quicken. The entire restaurant held its breath. Would the biker back down, or make the worst mistake of his life? The biker's smirk faltered for just a second. He hadn't expected this kind of silence, the kind that felt heavier than a scream. Keanu Reeves didn't move. He didn't have to. His eyes alone held an unshakable authority, a quiet warning that spoke louder than any threat. The biker clenched his fists, trying to mask his unease. "I don't care who you think you are, old man. Stay out of this." Keanu took another step forward, unshaken, unreadable. His voice remained dangerously calm. "Walk away." The biker scoffed. "Or what?" A slow smirk tugged at Keanu's lips. "You don't want to find out." For a split second, the biker saw something in Keanu's eyes, something lethal, something that told him this wasn't just an actor sitting in a hotel restaurant. This was a man who had seen real fights, real consequences. The restaurant was dead silent. Even the guests who had tried to ignore the confrontation were now fully invested. Sarah's hands trembled around the tray she held. Would Keanu really fight this guy? Would anyone stop this before it got worse? The biker exhaled sharply, nostrils flaring. His pride told him to keep pushing, but his gut, the one thing that had kept him alive all these years, told him to back down. For a long moment, he and Keanu stared each other down. Then, with a loud scoff, the biker grabbed his leather jacket from the chair, glaring at Sarah one last time. Lucky break, girl. He turned and stormed out of the hotel, shoving past the doors. Keanu didn't move until the man was completely gone. Then, as if nothing had happened, he slowly returned to his seat, picking up his coffee. Sarah. Room finally exhaled. Sarah stood frozen, staring at him. Thank you, she whispered. Keanu took a sip of his coffee and gave her a small, reassuring nod. You're welcome. But what no one noticed, what only Keanu saw, was the way the biker glanced back from outside the window. His eyes, burning with something more than just anger. Something told Keanu that this wasn't over yet. The night settled over the city, and the hotel returned to its usual rhythm. But something felt off. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Even though Keanu had sent the biker packing, she had seen the hatred in his eyes. Men like him didn't just walk away. As she cleared a table near the entrance, the glass door slammed open. She gasped. It was him. The biker was back, but this time, he wasn't alone. 2 other men followed behind him, both built like street brawlers, their leather jackets creaking as they stepped forward. The restaurant went silent. The biker's lips curled into a cruel smirk. I didn't like how our little chat ended earlier. His voice was low, taunting. Sarah's heart pounded. She took a step back. Please, just leave. One of his friends chuckled. Oh, sweetheart, we're not here for you. The biker turned his head slightly, his cold gaze locking onto Keanu Reeves, who was still seated at his table. Keanu slowly placed his coffee cup down. The biker sneered. Tough guy, huh? Thought you could embarrass me? Keanu's expression didn't change. He simply leaned back in his chair, calm, composed, unshaken. You should leave. The biker laughed, glancing at his men. Hear that? He thinks he's in charge. One of the men cracked his knuckles. Maybe we should teach him a lesson. Sarah's breath hitched. This wasn't just a fight anymore, this was an ambush. But Keanu didn't move. He simply tilted his head slightly, as if studying them. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, You really don't want to do this. The biker's smirk faltered. There it was again. That quiet, terrifying confidence. But his pride wouldn't let him back down. Not in front of his boys. He lunged forward. A mistake. In a blink, Keanu was on his feet. The entire restaurant gasped as he sidestepped the biker's attack effortlessly, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting it in one fluid motion. Crack. The biker screamed as Keanu spun him around and slammed him face first onto the table. The 2 other men charged. Keanu dodged the first one's swing, grabbing his arm and flipping him onto the ground as if he weighed nothing. The second man swung wildly, but Keanu blocked with ease, delivering a sharp elbow to the ribs before sweeping his legs out from under him. Within seconds, all 3 bikers were on the ground. The restaurant erupted into stunned silence. Sarah's mouth hung open. Did that just happen? Keanu adjusted his jacket, looking down at the groaning biker. I told you to leave. The biker couldn't even respond, his pride shattered as badly as his body. Keanu sighed, pulled out his wallet, and left a generous tip on the table. Then, with one last glance at Sarah, a silent assurance that she was safe, he turned and calmly walked toward the exit. The entire restaurant watched as he left, still processing what they had just witnessed. Sarah swallowed, hard, still gripping her tray. She had just seen something she would never forget. The hotel was quiet again, but the tension still lingered in the air. Sarah stood behind the counter, still shaken by what had happened. Keanu Reeves had taken down 3 men in seconds, all without breaking a sweat. She should have felt safe, now. But she didn't. Something told her this wasn't over. Midnight. The hotel parking lot. The biker sat in his truck, seething. His hand still throbbed from where Keanu had twisted it, his ribs ached, and his pride, completely shattered. His boys were just as beaten, groaning in pain beside him. But humiliation wasn't something he could live with. He wanted payback, and this time he came prepared. A gun rested on the passenger seat. His fingers curled around the handle. If fists couldn't handle Keanu, maybe a bullet could. He slammed the door open and stepped out. Inside the hotel, Sarah was finishing up for the night when she heard it, a metallic click. Her blood ran cold. That was a gun being cocked. She turned and saw him. The biker stood just outside the hotel entrance, gripping a pistol, his bruised face twisted with rage. "Get out here, Reeves," he bellowed. "You think you can humiliate me and walk away?" The restaurant fell into terrified silence. Guests froze in their seats. Some ducked. Others scrambled for cover. Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for the hotel phone. She needed to call the police. Before she could dial, Keanu stood up. He walked forward, calm, unshaken, as if the gun wasn't even there. "Put it down." His voice was low, commanding. The biker laughed bitterly. "Why? You scared now?" Keanu sighed. "Not scared, just giving you a chance." The biker's eye twitched. "A chance? A chance for what?" Keanu took another slow step forward. "To walk away with your life." Silence. Sarah's heart pounded. The biker hesitated for just a second. He could feel it. The same thing he had felt earlier. Keanu wasn't bluffing, but his anger overpowered his fear. He pulled the trigger. Bang! The restaurant screamed, but when the smoke cleared, Keanu wasn't there. The biker's eyes widened in shock. "What the—" Before he could react, Keanu was already behind him. In one swift motion, Keanu disarmed him, twisting his arm and slamming him into the pavement. The gun skidded across the ground. The biker gasped, pinned beneath Keanu's grip. "How?" Keanu leaned down, his voice calm. "You hesitated." Before the biker could say another word, the sound of police sirens filled the air. Sarah had called them just in time. Keanu stood up, letting the cops take over. The biker was dragged away, screaming curses. As the officers cuffed him, Keanu turned toward Sarah. She was still shaken, gripping the counter for support. "You okay?" Keanu asked. She swallowed hard, then gave a small, shaky nod. He gave her a reassuring smile. "Good." Then, without another word, he picked up his jacket and walked away. Sarah watched him go, still in awe. That night she realized something. Keanu Reeves wasn't just an actor. The dust had settled and the hotel was once again peaceful, or so it seemed. Sarah had finished her shift, but she couldn't stop thinking about the night's events. She'd always admired Keanu Reeves on screen, but seeing him in action, in person, was a whole different experience. He wasn't just a hero in movies, he was a protector, a force to be reckoned with. But deep down, she had a nagging feeling. This wasn't over. As she stepped into the hotel parking lot, a chilling realization hit her. The biker wasn't alone. She spotted 2 sleek black SUVs parked at the edge of the lot, engines running. Men were waiting inside. "This is bad," she thought, but before she could react, a voice called out from behind her. "Sarah." She spun around. Keanu was standing by his motorcycle, his eyes scanning the area. "They're back," she whispered, almost afraid to speak. Keanu didn't say anything, but the look in his eyes said it all. He already knew. Without a word, he motioned for Sarah to get into the hotel. They barely made it inside when the 2 SUVs screeched to a halt in front of the hotel. 4 heavily armed men stepped out, their eyes locked on Keanu. "We've got a score to settle," one of them snarled. Keanu didn't flinch. He stepped forward, his calm demeanor never wavering. "Then let's settle it." The men pulled out their weapons, but before they could make a move, Keanu's training kicked in. He was faster, stronger, and ready. With blinding speed, he disarmed the first man, sending him crashing to the ground. Two more went down in mere seconds, their weapons useless in Keanu's grip. The last man, the leader, rushed forward with a knife. But Keanu was already there, grabbing the man by the arm and twisting it until he dropped the blade. Keanu's voice was low but full of authority. "You can't win this fight." The man snarled, his face red with fury. "You think you've won? You've got no idea who you're messing with." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "I think you're about to find out." With one swift motion, he incapacitated the last man, leaving him on the ground, groaning. Sarah stood at the entrance, shocked by the display of skill and precision. Keanu walked toward her, his expression softening. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. She nodded, still in awe of what had just happened. "Yeah, I'm fine, but how did you know?" Keanu's gaze softened. "I never leave a fight unfinished." He looked down at the defeated men, then back at Sarah. "This is over now." With the sound of police sirens growing louder, Keanu turned and walked toward his motorcycle. "Stay safe, Sarah." And without another word, he disappeared into the night. Sarah never saw him again, but she would never forget the man who stood up for her, who ended the nightmare, and who became her hero in the truest sense of the word.